Welcome to another live stream, and today I'm going to be talking about the Black Panther Oscar okey-doke. Now, recently, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences decided to nominate Black Panther for 7 Academy Awards. And what a lot of Black people don't understand is that this is part of an okey-doke that is getting ready to be played on the Black community. Now, when it comes down to these awards are nothing more than a popularity contest. And Sid Field, the author of Screenplay, stated this in his book, Screenplay. So in his book, he tells us how what these awards are, what value they have, and how it's not really about merit or the quality of a film as it relates to these awards, but it's all about popularity. And what the Academy wants to do with this Black Panther nomination is they want to make it like they can create this whole narrative regarding the Black community. So they want to create a narrative regarding the Black community, and they want to use the Black Panther film as a springboard to push that narrative. Now, when it comes down to the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, they are notorious for giving awards to films that usually fit a very racist narrative. If we look at all of the Academy Award-winning Black films with Black performers in them, they usually were mammies like your Hattie McDaniel in Gone with the Wind. They're usually Black brutes like your Denzel Washington in Training Day, or they were Jezebels like your Halle Berry in Monsters Ball. So usually when it came down to the roles that Black people got, they were usually they were degrading and stereotypical. And your Black Panther fits right into that narrative once you start looking critically at the imagery in this Black Panther film. When you look at the imagery in Black Panther, you will see how just racist it is, because you have people like Professor Black Truth said in many of his videos before. He said that they had people in in grass skirts and spears, and then you had the guy with the plate lip, and then you have all of these images in this film, and they talk about how this is a positive film and an uplifting film. And it's not an uplifting film. It's actually, they try to slip insults to us and then try to sell it to us as empowerment. And what they want to do with this Oscar nomination is, again, pull the wool over the Black community's eyes and give them a symbolic victory. Now, when it comes down to Black folks, they love symbolic victories, and they like the idea of winning something that they didn't earn, and then getting this symbol that says, oh, this Black person did something, but really it wasn't something made by a Black person. And Black Panther fits right within that narrative of symbolic victories, just like your Barack Obama was your Black president of the United States, but he really was not representative of Black people, and he wasn't even raised around Black people. Because if you look at your Barack Obama, he came from a white mother, and he was taught the culture of from a white woman, and that culture teaches him the whole thing that he thinks he's a white man and he's Black on the outside, but he's white on the inside. So your Barack Obama was a symbolic victory, and your Black Panther, again, is another symbolic victory, because when you take a critical look at the Black Panther and the foundations of it, the Black Panther was a character created by your Stan Lee and your Jack Kirby, 2 Jewish white men. And what we're seeing is their image of Black. We're not seeing our image of Black. So that's also how we get an Oscar okey-doke, because they're sitting there praising this film, talking about it's a great milestone for Black cinema, but we didn't create the Black Panther. We didn't create anything as related to the Black Panther. Yes, you had Ryan Coogler create an adaptation of it, but when you take a critical look at everything, it was not our story and it does not come from us. So that's how they pull an okey-doke on us. And that's how they make a fool out of us, making us believe we have accomplished something when we haven't really accomplished anything and we haven't gotten anything out of it as related to this film. And the whole fix has been in with this Black Panther film ever since the early parts of early parts of the promotion, and that fix has been in for ever since the promotion. And you could see it when they were talking about. 1 minute, I just got to put this link on Twitter. Letting everybody know where the live stream is. And you can see the fix getting ready to come in early on as related to this Black Panther movie. And the fix was in with the Academy because they did to give this film an award early on. They wanted to create a whole new category for this film. I think it was called Best Popular Film or something like that. They wanted to create an entirely new award just so they could give this film an award. And when you see Hollywood doing things like that, again, that's all about pushing a narrative in the world. And it's really an insulting narrative when you think about it critically, because it's saying that this film couldn't win on the merits, so we had to go out here and create a special award for it. It's basically like an affirmative action for Black film. And that's a real slap in the face to guys like Ryan Coogler, basically saying to people, okay, we have to make a special award for Black Panther to celebrate its accomplishment, but we don't want to judge the film on the merits. Now, when I watched the film as a film critic and as a screenwriter, I can see many of the errors in that film. And that's one of the reasons why when I look at your Golden Globes, your SAG Awards, and the Academy Awards, I can say, you know, something is wrong here because this film shouldn't have ever been nominated for an Oscar as related to Best Picture, because there are numerous technical errors in the film. I mean, several of the scenes, especially in the third act, are where we have real serious problems. And just based on the third act alone of the film, I would say the film just doesn't meet the standard of a Best Picture. And as related to the cinematography in certain scenes, I would say it doesn't meet the standards for Best Picture. And some of the visual effects are extremely weak. And one of the things that I looked at this film, I said to myself, you know, Avengers Infinity War, its special effects were a lot better, but nobody wants to nominate Avengers Infinity War for anything. But Black Panther, based on those rhinos alone, that alone would be my reason for not even considering this film for nomination. Thank you, Southeast 01, for the donation. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I'm reading through the chats. Sam, the man who can, says that the nomination means nothing. And I have to agree with him. The nomination doesn't really mean anything, because any of us who know about the industry, again, we know that this is just a symbolic gesture to try to appease people's views of things. They want to have this idea and narrative about Black people, so they want to make this narrative saying that we are inclusive, we are all about diversity, and they're virtue signaling with this Black Panther nomination. And they want a virtue signal by giving this film an award. And they've been trying to build the foundation to give this film an award even before the film launched. Because again, we look at that whole Academy Awards thing where they wanted to create Best Commercial Film, create an entirely new award just to give this film an award. And you can clearly see the fix being in for this Black Panther film. And I see the fix being in, and that's why I call it an Oscar okey-doke, because hey, Michonne tonight, she's one of my regular viewers. Hey, Leah. And yeah, but what they do is they want to trick you into believing that this film is Oscar worthy when I look at it again on the artistic merits, and the film just isn't strong enough to stand with classic films like your Martys, your Rockies, or even nominated films like the original Star Wars. When I look at the again the special effects in that third act, that whole third act, all that special effects literally would knock that film out of consideration. And the story itself, when I look at the adaptation of the story of Black Panther, it's just not strong enough when I compare it to other great films that have been considered by the Academy. When I look at films that have been considered by the Academy, they have met a far higher standard than your Black Panther. Because when I look at your Black Panther, it's not even one of the best Marvel Studios films. When I consider high quality Marvel Studios films, I consider the first Iron Man to be one of the highest quality films. I consider Captain America, the First Avenger, to be a high quality film. And the film that really should have been considered for an award is Captain America, the Winter Soldier. If you want to talk about nominating a film for an Academy Award, it was Winter Soldier, because Winter Soldier was the tightest of all of the MCU movies. And it was one of the best shot cinematically. It had the tightest special effects, and it had the strongest character development overall. But nobody ever thought about giving Captain America, the Winter Soldier, a nomination for an award, or even considered creating another category for Winter Soldier. But we're going to give Black Panther an award, a film that has numerous technical flaws and numerous flaws in its screenplay and numerous flaws in its cinematography. That film will be given a consideration for an award, but this Captain America, the Winter Soldier, just not considered at all. When I look at that, that's a red flag for me, and it shows me everything that Sid Field said in screenplay about these awards being a popularity contest, and these days more of a political contest and a political agenda, because these awards are used to push political agendas, and part of pushing that political agenda is Hollywood virtue signaling to everyone that they aren't racist and that they are so tolerant that they're going to go out here and give this Black Panther movie this Academy Award nomination and these other award nominations. And they're going to give this film all these award nominations, and it just doesn't seem kosher, because I look at it, and again, the fix was in from minute one. And we're not looking at this film on the merits of the film. We're looking at this film as a way to say to Black people, hey, we're not racist. And this film shows we're not racist. But the great irony is, when they do this film, they show how racist they are, because we see the imagery in the film. Again, those scenes of the people in the grass skirts, the spears, the guy with the plate lip, and all of these other pseudo Afrocentric images. And this is where we see the racism lie. Moreover, we also see the racism lying in Hollywood, because when we get behind the scenes in Hollywood, what happens is we don't see Black people getting opportunities to film their own projects. And with the success of Black Panther, I'm looking at it and going, you're saying that this film is so successful. Yes, it made $700 million in America and $300 million here overseas, but you don't want to give any opportunity to Black filmmakers, nor do you want to give opportunities to Black writers of fantasy and science fiction. And that showed with A Wrinkle in Time. I look at A Wrinkle in Time and I saw the passive aggressiveness of Hollywood. Thank you, Cathode Ray 60, for the donation. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate every donation. But I look at it, I go, with A Wrinkle in Time, you just took away everybody's opportunity. You had Black Panther make all this money, but there were no efforts made to help any of those brothers and sisters out here, like myself and many others, who have been toiling for years trying to get African American fantasy and science fiction out here, or trying to get projects up off the ground. Because I know so many brothers and sisters out here. I just went to the Black Comic Book Expo at the Schomburg, and there were so many brothers and sisters there with projects, and nobody ever talks about, hey, let's help those brothers and sisters get their projects out there. And that's where we clearly see Hollywood's agenda. Again, this was all about virtue signaling and then pushing their narrative to say that they're tolerant, but they're not tolerant at all. They're not even caring about Black people. They just want to create this symbolic victory and say that we did something, and that this is the first Black film to be considered for these prestigious awards. And then with the SAG award that it won, a symbolic victory, but that symbolic victory does not help Black people. And that's one of my big issues with Hollywood as related to this Black Panther Oscar okey-doke. They want to put all these pictures up here saying, oh, we finally considered this film that's supposed to be Black, but the film is not Black at all. Again, it's not anything we made. It's not something we created, and it's not a property that we own. It's a property owned by Marvel Comics, which is owned by Disney. It is created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, two white Jewish men, and it is their image of Black people. And it's nothing Black at all as related to this film. Nothing Black at all about this film in any way, shape, or form. And then we look at the big picture of things. This film didn't really benefit Black people. It didn't give Black people anything that they could say they earned on their merits outside of maybe Ryan Coogler, Chadwick Boseman, and a handful of Black folks in Hollywood. It didn't put any money in our community. It didn't put any money in our businesses, and it didn't put any money in our pockets. So when I look at this Black Panther, it's like I sit there and go, it's not ours. And they're going to say that it's our accomplishment. But that's, again, a slap in our faces, because it's not our accomplishment. It's not something we made, and it's not something that comes from our community. So I look at this film and I say to myself, you know, I see the okey-doke getting ready to be played on Black people. And when the people are going to sit there, and they're going to sit there and praise this film and say these awards that it got were so great. And I'm sitting there going, what you're trying to reward people for something that had nothing to do with them. And then you want them to have this symbolic victory. And then you're going to use what Hollywood wants to do, is use that symbolic victory as a gateway towards getting Black people to start watching and buying more of their projects and more of their films. And that's taking money out of our community, because that's what Black Panther really did. It took a lot of our money out of our community and didn't give us anything back. Now, any other community, like the Japanese or the other or the Hispanic community, if they made a film with their characters and properties, they're going to get some of that money for themselves. I mean, if you took a character from Japan, from manga or anime, and you adapted it, they were going to make sure that their products were on the shelf right next to Marvel's products, or make sure that Marvel imported their products so they could get some sort of royalties out of this company, or get some revenue from this company. But when it came down to Black folks and Black Panther last year, we took about $600-700 million, gave it to them and Disney didn't give us anything in return. They did not try to elevate any of our writers. They did not try to elevate any of our artists. They did not try to bring any sort of jobs or opportunities to Black people. And that's a real insult, again, to Black people. You have this character who is a Black character, but it's not benefiting Black people. It's not bringing any money back to the Black community. It's not bringing business to Black folks, and it's not bringing Black dollars back to the Black community, because part of a healthy economic business model is making sure that if you're going to make a project, that the project benefits the Black community. Like, for example, when I did this book, Legendary Mad Matilda, I got a lot of donations from brothers, and I went out here and I hired Mike Williams to design the cover so I could flip the dollars over. And now it wasn't really donations. I got O'Shea Jackson. He asked me to write some articles for him, and I wrote the articles for him, and I took the money that I got from O'Shea and I used it to pay Mike Williams to design the cover. So I made sure that the money stayed in the Black community. I wanted to flip the dollars over, because that's all part of group economics, is making sure that when somebody gives you Black dollars, you then take those dollars and then flip those dollars over so that somebody else can benefit from that money. So that's all part. I write novels and I write ebooks and paperbacks. I have never written a comic. I've always wanted to write a comic, but I've never written one. But it's something I've always wanted to do. I'm going to leave a link to all my books on Amazon.com in a minute right now. Yeah. There's a link to my books, but I've always made an effort to go out and try to flip those dollars over. Like, if you guys give me money, I take the minute to flip the dollars over. I remember I had a sister. She gave me a donation in 2016, and I used that to pay Bill Walko for the cover for Isis Samurai Goddess. So I took the money that I got from the sister, and I took some of my own money, and I used it to try to flip it over. And again, they gave me money. I tried to make sure that it went towards either increasing my business or trying to help out other Black people, or that's what I was trying to do. Same thing with Isis Imitation of Life. I got donations, and I took those donations to pay for this cover. So I wanted to make sure that the money stayed in the community, or it stayed towards enriching the community, or towards making sure that another Black artist or another artist got the money. So I wanted to make sure that money stayed in the community and, was flipped over. And when it came down to this Black Panther, money left our community, but then we didn't get to get anything. They just left, and Marvel got rich at our expense. And now they want to push this narrative on us that this movie is going to be a major part of pop culture, that it's going to be a defining moment in Black pop culture, and that it's going to be something defining as related to Black people. And that is the greatest lie ever to be told, that you're going to say that this film is going to be a defining moment for Black people, just like Barack Obama was supposed to be a defining moment for Black folks as related to his election. Because we look at the election of Barack Obama, yes, he was a Black president on paper, but again, he did absolutely nothing for Black people. So when I look at this film, it's another one of those symbolic victories that doesn't really benefit Black people, and it does not really help our community in any way, shape, or form. Because if this was about really helping Black people, again, we would be trying to go out here, Marvel would be going out here, and Disney would be going out here, and they would be trying to put some of these brothers and sisters on, like myself and many of these other brothers and sisters out here, who, like guys like Chris L. Brown, who's created the great Omega Black manga, or the brothers and sisters who make the great Black Sands series. You'll be thinking about putting all of those characters on and allowing them to have a platform and allowing them to build an audience. But your Disney and your Academy, they're not really interested in that. What they want to do is give Black folks this symbolic victory, have them running back to Hollywood, and then running back to support the same Hollywood that has gone out of its way to degrade the Black community, just like they show us how little respect they have for us. Like recently with that new Kevin Hart minstrel show, where he's literally playing the butler for that old man. Oh, thank you, Goku MGTOW. He says he's going to buy some of my books once he gets his tax return. I really appreciate all the support you guys give me because it helps me move things forward. And I'm planning on moving something really forward when I'm doing this ISIS graphic novel. It's going to be launching on March 5th. That is the official launch date for the ISIS graphic novel Indiegogo. And I'm going to be doing that in about 2 months. I'm still working out the platform. I'm still working out the kinks. And that is my next goal, is making sure that this ISIS graphic novel winds up getting launched. Now, again, they want to get you back on the plantation to continue consuming their products, but those products, again, slap you in the face. I mean, I look at that Kevin Hart movie where he's being the butler to this rich white man, and it's a certified minstrel show. You have a guy who is one of our tops at the box office, and you put him in another movie where he's playing a butler, and you won't expect Black people to sit there and spend money on this. And I'm not going to spend money to watch Kevin Hart play a butler, just like I used to watch John Diggle playing a butler on Arrow. I mean, all these characters, they're supposed to be so-called diverse, but when we take a critical look at them, they're the same old stereotypes repackaged, just like you have John Diggle the butler, and then you have the bumbling, stumbling, Mr. Terrific, who in the comics is the world's third smartest man, but on Arrow, he's a completely bumbling, stumbling, incompetent gay man, and that's a real insult to Black people. But they want to call themselves giving you this award so that you won't look at the way Hollywood portrays Black people. You're going to look at this symbolic victory and think that this is some sort of success, when again, it's not any success at all. It's not anything except a symbolic victory that makes you think, oh, we got a nomination. But when you take a critical look at it, you go, hey, where are all the other Black fantasy films? Because Black Panther, again, #1 movie in 2018, the entire year, #1 movie. And yet we don't see any sort of effort made by Disney to go out here and make African-American fantasy and science fiction and see a marketplace for African-American fantasy and science fiction. No, they shut that down almost immediately when A Wrinkle in Time failed, and Agent DuVernay decided to go out here and sit there and say that she didn't care and it didn't matter, and she just wanted to make whatever film she wanted. She literally closed the door on any other African-American getting into creating fantasy and science fiction, because once they saw the box office drop with A Wrinkle in Time, that closed the door for any other movie studio going out here to create another fantasy film featuring Black people. And that's where I really see the passive aggressiveness of your Disney as related to Black Panther. And it's also where I see the whole okey-doke as related to this whole Oscar nomination. They just want to virtue signal again with this Oscar nomination, and they want to say that they are including us. But how do you include us when you don't include us in the creative process? Because that's another issue I have with Hollywood, is that we don't have that many Black screenwriters in Hollywood, and we don't get that many Black screenwriters projects that get greenlit or even get any sort of good distribution overall. So these are all issues that this whole award is not even dealing with, because they want to sit there and again take our money and then tell us that they're doing something, when in actuality all you're getting is the same amount of nothing from these people. You're not getting anything out of them at all. They're sitting there, they're putting up and saying, oh, this is a milestone and accomplishment, when this isn't a milestone and an accomplishment. And when it comes down to these shows, we see how desperate, the Academy really is, because their ratings have been falling off. And the Golden Globes had the lowest ratings in the history of the show, because people could see right through the Golden Globes and that Black Panther nomination. And many Black people are seeing through this whole nomination right here. They're seeing it, saying, this nomination, all of a sudden you come into us talking about you want to nominate this film, but over the last 3-4 years, your ratings have fallen because you've created this far left soapbox where you spend 2-3 hours ranting about President Donald Trump. And then when we try to talk about the lack of opportunities, you literally ignore us. Moreover, when we talk about the lack of opportunities for Black actresses, you ignore them. And then you want to sit there and say, you are all about being inclusive, when it's clear you have been exclusive for years, especially if you compare this era of Black cinema to what I call the second golden age of Black cinema, which was during the mid to late 80s, when Spike Lee, Robert Townsend, the Hudlin brothers, they were making some classic films, yet none of those classic films got any sort of support or praise. I mean, films like Your Malcolm X, films like Do the Right Thing, none of those films were really nominated for Best Picture. And those films were far superior to your Black Panther. I mean, Do the Right Thing blows the doors off Black Panther, wasn't really considered. Your Malcolm X wasn't really considered for much of anything. And nobody wanted to talk about, Mario Van Peebles and New Jack City. Nobody wanted to talk about those films out here. I'm a millionaire. Oh, it's 5 a.m. in the UK. I'm sorry, but this is the only time I have to do it. But when it comes down to our films that we consider to be of high merit and high value, no one wants to consider those films, because when I think of some of the best Black films, things like Five Heartbeats, New Jack City, House Party, Hollywood Shuffle, what was a couple of them? Those were really quality films. Those were masterfully well done films. But you're going to tell me Black Panther, a film with numerous technical flaws, you're going to nominate that for an Oscar, but you're going to ignore all those Black films from 25 years ago. So that's where I can see the okey-doke and the fix being in for the Academy, because the Academy's ratings are at an all-time low. And that's part of the reason why they went out of their way to ask Kevin Hart to host the Oscars, because your Kevin Hart is the most popular Black performer in Hollywood. He's getting $20 million a film. He opens #1 at the box office. And they desperately needed Kevin Hart to go out here and be the host for the Oscars, in the hopes of propping up the ratings for the Oscars. So they needed Kevin Hart more than Kevin Hart needed them. But then you had these SJWs come in and they made these accusations against Kevin Hart, and he withdrew his name. And now the Oscars are in serious trouble. So when Kevin Hart withdrew his name, all of a sudden we get this Black Panther nomination. And with this Black Panther nomination, we see what's up right now. They want to get that Black audience to come watch this Oscar show, which has fallen off dramatically in the ratings, and people just aren't buying the narrative, and they're not buying the story that they're trying to sell. And I sit there, I say, yeah, you attacked Kevin Hart, you then made him leave, and now you want to come here with Black Panther. You want to bring, this is the only time I have to do it. I'm a millionaire. It's the only time I have to do streams, but I might try to do something later on. But I look at it and I say, I see the con going on. I see the okey-doke trying to be pulled. And sadly, there are some people in the Black community who believe the okey-doke, and they believe that they're going to actually be moving forward with this nomination. And I'm sitting there going, you're not moving forward at all, because if we were moving forward, it would be Black folks getting opportunities, and those Black people would be getting their projects greenlit. They would be getting their screenplays greenlit. There would be numerous Black folks getting projects up off the ground. We would be seeing stuff like a golden age starting to come up all over again, because well, the dude's thoughts. When we look at Black Panther taking money out of the Black community, it's an argument you can make, because, again, we don't own any of that property, whereas other films that Blacks watch, those properties are owned by Black people. So we can make that argument for Black Panther, because clearly we didn't own that. We don't own that. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby created it. Disney owns it because they bought Marvel. So we can make the argument that, Black Panther took money out of the Black community, because Black Panther did take money out of the Black community. It took money at the box office. It took money at the toy store. It took money in merchandising. And they took all of that money out of our community, but then, again, did not offer any opportunity to other Black people. I mean, again, I just came from, a couple of weeks ago, the Black Comic Expo, or the Black Comic Con at Schaumburg, and there were numerous creators there, and none of those people ever got a platform to showcase their work or feature their work, or got any support from this whole Black Panther promotion. I mean, if this Black Panther promotion was all about helping Black people expand their horizons, it would have been all about helping Black folks, learn about African American fantasy, like I produce with the ISIS series. It would have been about helping other Black producers, like the publishers of the Black Sands manga. It would have been all about helping them find new readers and helping Black kids find their work. It would have been about helping Black people find out about other African American fantasy writers like myself, who have created heroes like John Haynes, who I featured in The Temptation of John Haynes, The Man Who Rules the World, and the popular John Haynes, A Conversation with Death. It would have been all about helping other Black writers and Black artists find a platform. And it's about then people helping us find that platform, and helping us find more venues like comic shops where we can get distribution, so we can get more exposure. So that's why I can say that, money was taken out of our community, and it just left, but there was no opportunity given to Black creators to get revenue, not only revenue for themselves, but get exposure for their projects, and get exposure for their work, and share their work with a larger audience, because there's a lot of great Black fantasy out there, but it just doesn't get the exposure it deserves, because a lot of times, a lot of people like myself, they're working on shoestring budgets. Hey, Tim Drake, what's up? They're working on, shoestring budgets. Like, for years, I was working on a shoestring budget until I started getting donations from people. And then I was able to try to elevate the quality of my work. And that's the type of support people need, and that's the type of opportunities they need. And I look at the whole thing with Black Panther again, and I see, again, just a symbolic victory, because at Marvel itself, we don't see opportunities being given to Black writers, except for those who fit the narrative, like your Ta-Nehisi Coates. Now, your Ta-Nehisi Coates, they'll put him out here again as another symbol and say, oh, look at this Black writer we have writing Black Panther and Captain America. But when we look at all these other Black writers out here, because I know numerous Black comic pros, and they're not getting the opportunities to go out here and work on these projects. They're not getting the opportunity to go out here and, showcase their talent. And that's really sad, because there's so much great talent out there, but there you have people talking about, oh, how this Black Panther was such a success, but we don't want to have us use that as a springboard to spring others towards getting success. Because as I see it, if you really were serious, it would have been about helping others get that success so that we can have that real diversity, like people like the late, great Dwayne McDuffie gave us at Milestone. Because with Milestone, that was a company that really started to show us real diversity. Because when I think about Milestone, they showed us Black people from all walks of life, all sorts of cultures, and showed us that the Black culture was a lot bigger than what you usually got in most Marvel and DC comics, where, yeah, you got a Black hero here or there, but they really were not a centerpiece. They weren't a main character. And a main character, again, as I stated in a previous live stream, is written and structured very differently than your supporting character. And it's like when I look at Jim Rose, he was a supporting character, but he wasn't like Tony Stark. Tony Stark was a main character, so he was like an inventor and he could create things, whereas Jim Rose, he was a side character. Yes, he could put on an Iron Man suit, but he couldn't fix an Iron Man suit. And I saw that in the run that he had. And yeah, he couldn't fix a suit. He couldn't work on a different suit. So he couldn't do things. Oh, thank you, Bot Boy VS. I appreciate you going out to buy my books on Amazon. I really appreciate I really appreciate your support there, because I really want to try to increase my readership. I want to try to increase my sales numbers for the books, because the more numbers you have, the stronger you can show, and then you can really start being a contender. So yeah, they haven't really done much with Rhodey, especially after they killed him in Civil War II. With Rhodey, what they did was they killed him and then they brought him back. They started a little subplot. I forget his name, Dan Slott. He started a subplot where Rhodey was scared to put on armor, and it really hasn't really gone that far with Rhodey. So they haven't really done much with him. I mean, David Michelini and Bob Layton did a lot with Jim Rhodes, and then I think Jenny O'Neill tried to do something with Jim Rhodes and when he made him Iron Man, but he really showed that, he's just not there. Goku Midtown, I would never consider selling SJS Direct, because the reason why I wouldn't sell SJS Direct, because I know what these corporations do to Black characters, and what they would do to Black characters is they would bury those characters. And looks like we got a troll talking about InfoWars or something like that. No, American military equals freedom. But what they want, I would never sell it, because what happens with it is that the corporation, what they're going to do is they're going to bury those characters, or they're going to try to find a way to change the narrative of those characters. And when they change the narrative of those characters, what they're going to do is, either when it comes down to the Black male characters like a John Haynes, what they were going to do to a character like John Haynes is they're going to emasculate him, or they're going to make him gay, or they're going to try to make him a background character, or what they're going to do is they're going to bury that character where they just don't use him. And when it comes down to Black female characters like Isis, what they're going to do is they're just going to never use her at all. She's just going to just be in the background and never used, because they don't want that Black female standard of beauty coming up and supplanting the white female standard of beauty, nor do they want the Black male character surpassing the white male characters in terms of popularity. That was one of the issues they had with Static Shock back in the early 2000s, because Static Shock was starting to become an extremely popular show. So they tried to find things to do to bury Static, and that's why they didn't release the DVDs for years. I mean, I was one of the first bloggers to come out and say, there's something wrong here, that this show's DVDs never came out. And Justice League came out within about a year and a half. Batman Beyond came out about 2 years after the show ended. But um, Static Shock, we didn't get to see those DVDs until about 2015, 2016 or so. And the show ended in 2004. And the show was the top rated cartoon on Kids WB for 3 straight years, but they wouldn't put Static Shock on DVD. And what was crazy was white kids loved Static Shock. Static Shock was extremely popular and proves my point that they just don't want those images out there, because if you start showing these humanized and balanced images of Black people, then white people will see Black people as human beings, and that's what makes a lot of these corporate owners very uncomfortable. The whole idea that we have a Black character who's on the same level as a white character and is as popular as a white character, they don't really want that. And that was also starting to be seen with these Black Panther figures, like Marvel Legends. They said the thing sold, all those Black Panther figures sold completely out. So it makes them uncomfortable. And they didn't want to do a Black Panther Wave 2 until Hasbro came in and said, you know, where's the Wave 2? And they said, okay, now we'll make a Wave 2. But they wanted to just make one wave and call it a day, but the thing sold completely out. So they don't really, that's why I won't sell SJS direct to a corporation, because I know what they would do with the character. I know what Disney would do. I know what Warner Brothers would do. I know what Comcast would do. They would bury everything and make sure that it is never seen again, that the books never go in print, they go out of print and just disappear forever, and that nobody knows anything about them, because they don't want to show you Black images that are positive. They don't want to show you Black images are humanized, and they don't like the idea of certain stories or certain concepts like I present. Like, for example, the whole title, The Man Who Rules the World, and then you have an image of a Black man. That makes a lot of people, white people, especially a lot of racists, uncomfortable to see the whole idea of an image of a Black man who says he's ruling the world. That makes them very uncomfortable. And then you show an image of a Black CEO like a John Haynes, where you have a Black man who is on the same level of a guy like a Tony Stark or Steve Rogers or a Nick Fury. He's up there on the same level, and he has the same level of power. But unlike your T'Challa, he's not following the same narrative. And that's the other issue I have with the whole Black Panther movie, was it followed a narrative that, you know, white supremacists like to push regarding Black people, where they play the divide and conquer game. You have T'Challa, who is the good Negro from Africa, and then you have your Killmonger, who is the angry Black man who from the Black community, comes from a female-headed household and is extremely emotional and extremely violent. And it's all about him destroying evil white people. And that's another issue I have with this film, because it portrays a lot of racist messages regarding Black people, is that it has us talking about the idea of, if a Black man gets power, what he's going to do is immediately start waging war on the evil white man. And that's not the case at all. And I make that point in both The Temptation of John Haynes and The Man Who Rules the World. When you have a Black man who gets power, he's not going to be out here talking about destroying white people. He's going to be talking about empowering Black people. And that's a message that the mainstream media does not want going out here, is the whole idea of talking about empowering Black people and educating Black people. Good morning, Morpheus. Morpheus used to live in my old neighborhood, and we've talked on several occasions, and I'm glad to have him here. But that's what they don't want you to see, is see a Black man talking about building Black-owned businesses, supporting Black-owned businesses, giving contracts to other Black people. That's not what they want to see on the screen. And you start talking about, you know, a Black man in power, and he's talking about empowering Black people, and he's talking about building businesses, and he's not, like your T'Challa, talking about white acceptance, because that's another issue I had with the film. And it's another thing that annoyed me about the narrative of Black Panther, it was about how this ancient advanced civilization was all about seeking the world's acceptance and not about competing with the rest of the world. I mean, when I look at your Black Panther, it wasn't about competition and saying that we're going to make our own and make our own stuff and compete with the rest of the world. It was about we need to be like the rest of the world. And I was really annoyed with that because it's not about us being with the rest of the world. It's about us competing with the rest of the world and changing our way of thinking so that we think about competing with the rest of the world, because having a competitive mindset, it's something that Black people need and Black men definitely need. They need to start thinking about being a competitor instead of being under white people and seeking white acceptance. That's what annoyed me most about Black Panther, was that it's like, oh, anybody who talks about competition, that wasn't even talked about even in the film, because that's not the narrative that Disney wanted to push with this film. Now, when I was doing Temptation of John Haynes, which is a book I urge everybody to go pick up, this is a great book. I talk about competition. I talk about, you know, helping out another Black man and setting aside your feelings, because John Haynes, he had a guy who had done him dirty, Scott Grayson, and Grayson had did him dirty in the past, but he realized that there was something more important than his feelings about Grayson and what he did years ago, and that was making sure that the Black community was taken care of. So he was always thinking less about his feelings and more about the bigger picture. And that was something that we didn't see in your Black Panther. It was all about your Killmonger's emotions or about your T'Challa seeking white acceptance. And it was, again, the whole message of Black empowerment wasn't even in that story, but it is in Temptation of John Haynes, and it is in Man Who Rules the World. And with the John Haynes character, I wanted to show that we're about empowerment and that we're about leadership, and that when we do things, this is what we're about. We're not about kill the white man, destroy the white man. We are about empower the Black man and help the Black man become great and help his community be great. And that's what we saw in your Luke Cage season 2, but they didn't like having Luke Cage on the air because Luke Cage told a story that, you know, people didn't want to hear, that the white people, especially those at Disney, didn't want to hear. They didn't want to see that on the air. So that when you saw Luke Cage, he was literally taking charge in his community, taking leadership in his community. He was being a man, and that made a lot of people extremely uncomfortable. When they saw Cage checking, especially that scene when he went into that white female mobster's place, he checked her hard, and that was something that really got people scared. And then the last scene when he became the power man, oh, that terrified people, because you saw a man that could not be controlled by white people, and he was running his own show. So that makes people really uneasy when they see a Black character like that. And that's why I believe Luke Cage got canceled. I don't believe that Netflix had ratings issues or number. I believe it had to do with narrative, because yes, they talked about canceling Daredevil in the 3rd season, but they're going to try to bring Daredevil back. So that tells me it's more about narrative than it was about numbers, because I look at Luke Cage and that season 2, that was, as I consider, one of the best things I have seen in almost 20 years. I look at that season 2, we actually saw a picture of an actual Black man in the community. We saw a Black man taking a leadership role, and we saw a Black man taking power in his community. And that's not something we saw in Black Panther. The reason why the Academy wants to go out of its way to praise Black Panther is because Black Panther fits the narrative that white Hollywood wants to see about Black people. They want to see this kind of docile, submissive Black male, but they don't want to see a Luke Cage type Black male. So what they want to do is they want to reward your Black Panther with a symbolic victory so that Black people will follow the story of your Black Panther, but they won't follow a character like Luke Cage. So I see what Hollywood is up to with this Black Panther award nomination, this Oscar nomination, and all these other nominations, is they want to get Black folks following down the lead of a Black Panther and see him as this ideal hero they need to aspire to. Meanwhile, they go out of their way to bury Luke Cage, which shows you this powerful, strong, masculine Black man who is in a strong leadership position. And that's something they just don't want to see us to see, because if we see that type of Black man, he's gonna be the kind of man like Professor Black Truth was talking about in his videos, who's gonna start talking about tangibles. And when you have a Black man talking about tangibles, that's something that makes them uncomfortable, because he's gonna ask for something to come back to his community, the same way I say that money should be coming back to our community. We shouldn't spend $700 million on a film and then not have any of that money come back in any way, shape, or form. And that's something that we should have been talking about when they started talking about they want to make this Black Panther movie and talk about targeting the Black audience. Well, we know you're going to make a couple $2 billion on this film, so some of that money needs to come back to the Black community. And that's one of the issues I have with this film, and I had with the marketing of this film. And I sit there and I say, you know, why you want to make all this money off us? We made the #1 movie in the world, and they're sitting there and saying they're not going to make any more other projects. And that's something you have to really put a question mark to. I mean, you have a proven film that shows you that there is an audience for African American fantasy, but you don't want to make any more films with African American fantasy leads. And that's something that's a red flag to me. You don't want to make those type of films. And the reason why, again, you don't want to make those type of films, because you're scared of the idea of a character like a John Haynes coming up, a masculine Black man who is in a leadership role. That makes them uncomfortable. And promoting the image of a masculine Black man, that makes people uncomfortable. And promoting a feminine character like an Isis, that makes them extremely uncomfortable as well. The whole idea of us taking control of our image and taking control of our narrative, that makes people extremely uncomfortable, and it makes them extremely uneasy regarding the Black. Because when Black people take control of our image, we get a completely different story. And I grew up during the 80s when I saw Black people taking control of our image, like your Bill Cosby with the Cosby Show. He took control of the Black image. And then we had people like Robert Townsend and Spike Lee taking control of the Black image. And they told completely different stories. Because if you look at the stories that people like your Bill Cosby told, your Robert Townsend, your Hudlin brothers, your Mario Van Peebles, they told completely different stories than what we got from the Hollywood when they were doing the Blaxploitation era. And when it came down to the Blaxploitation era, they only came to the Black audience because they weren't making money on these big budget musicals and these epic films with A-list white performers. So they decided to come to the Black community and sell us these no-budget Blaxploitation films that like your Dolomites, like your Pam Grier's, and all these other films. They want to come to us to make money to keep themselves afloat, but they didn't want to come to us until they were hurting. And we came out in the 80s and we started making our own stuff, and we started telling our own stories. And when we started telling our stories, that's when we got a very different and diverse picture. And I was blessed to grow up during the 80s. And I remember being 15 years old. And my brother brought over Hollywood Shuffle. And that was one of the films that literally changed my life. I remember watching Hollywood Shuffle, and it just totally changed my life, because Robert Townsend told a story and showed us the truth about what went on in Hollywood as related to the Black image. And he showed us that, you know, a lot of these Black actors, they don't really want to play these parts, but this is all that's available. And I remember one scene where he was talking about the Black acting school, and it just stayed with me, where he was talking about the guy who was talking about doing the jive walking, and he was showing that it was literally white people projecting these ideas onto black people. So the guy wasn't doing the jive walk wrong, and the white guy wanted to show him how to do the jive walk. And in that one scene, Robert Townsend showed us that this was about white people projecting their stereotypes onto us and not us and telling our story. And that was like a great irony in that film. And it was one of those things that stayed with me ever since I was about 15 years old when I first saw that film. Now, I'm reading through the chats, and yeah, Norman Lear really did hate on the Cosby Show because it doesn't fit his narrative. His narrative was Good Times, where he was pushing stereotypes. And I might make a video, Hardcore H, I'm going to make a video on this Jussie Smollett, but I'm going to do that tomorrow because I'm picking up information as I go along on Jussie Smollett, and it doesn't have the ring of truth to me. When I look at Jussie Smollett and what happened with him, I mean, it just doesn't add up. I mean, here you have a guy who he gets a letter in the mail saying that he's got this threat to his life, and he doesn't think to go, when he's going on his trip to Chicago, to add extra security or to look out for himself and be more aware because you're in a dangerous situation. And I'm sitting there going, it doesn't add up. So I'm going to go in depth on that in tomorrow's video. I'm going to talk about your Jussie Smollett because his story doesn't add up for me. It's like a 2 + 2 = 5. And I know how the entertainment industry works because next month is sweeps, and sweeps is where advertisers set the advertising rates for certain shows. And with it being sweeps month, you have Jussie Smollett and this incident happening just a couple of days before sweeps, and he gets this attack. And then Empire is probably going to be coming back in around February because Empire is one of Fox's hit shows. So this could be a marketing stunt done by Lee Daniels, and they use Jussie Smollett as a pawn in that. So when I look at this whole situation, it's a red flag. So I'm looking at the timing, and I'm looking at the whole setup of it because them going to a Democratic city talking about MAGA hats, and they're doing all this stuff in Chicago. I mean, it just doesn't add up. It's a 2 + 2 = 5. And then you have white guys talking about he's from Empire when how many white people watch Empire? So there are just so many red flags as related to, yeah, I would love to see Robert Townsend do another Meteor Man. Maybe you could get Kevin Hart to be the Meteor Man this time. That would actually work. Yeah, who goes out in -20-degree weather? Rapper 1000 is right. It's like it just doesn't add up. I mean, you could go Uber Eats, you could call out. I mean, and again, if he's going out at 2 a.m., it's not sounding right. It's just not sounding like something kosher. It just doesn't come together. And I look at the whole situation. I'm going to go in depth in it on a video. I'm going to do a whole video where I'm just going to go in depth talking about this Jussie Smollett, because I know how entertainment works. I know how the entertainment industry works. And I know when I see a marketing stunt. And this one, it looks just like a straight marketing stunt, because a lot of celebrities, what they will do is when they have a project getting ready to come out, they will either do things like get into trouble with misdemeanors in law enforcement. They will do things like pose nude in magazines, or they will act out in some way. And I look at one of the big red flags for me is he did not file a police report. I mean, if something is going on, like a threat like you get in the mail like that, you would immediately file a police report because you would want to have a record of it. And you would also be going again to this other city. You would go with a security team with you. So I'm looking at it, and it's not adding up. It's just not coming together. And then you're talking about MAGA hats in Chicago, a Democratic stronghold, and it just does not add up. So I just look at that. And again, it's like they're trying to, again, Hollywood, they always try to pull these type of okey-dokes on people. And they always try to pull these type of games on people. Morpheus wants me to define a publicity stunt. Yeah, and publicity stunt is what publicists and celebrities, they come together, they create this little event to get attention for the performer. So what they will do is they will stage something and they'll say something controversial during an interview where everything is scripted in the interview. They will stage this incident and then they will get people talking about the person. And then it's just usually about a week and a half before whatever new record drops or new movie drops. They will have them come out here and they will just come out here with this marketing stunt and they'll get people talking about them. But what will happen is people will get caught up in the controversy that they won't see that they're being marketed to, and then they'll go over and buy this guy's product. So that's what Nightwing. Yeah, I actually have an ISIS screenplay, but I would love to do a John Haynes screenplay. But I have an ISIS screenplay of the original ISIS. I have a screenplay adaptation of this ISIS. It's been sitting on my hard drive for years and it's just been sitting there. So I have that screenplay, but I have considered them, but if I ever did a project, it would be outside of Hollywood. I wouldn't want to have anything to do with Hollywood because again, Hollywood, they don't want to create these type of Black characters that are positive or balanced or humanized. What they would want to do is create characters that promote the narrative that Hollywood wants, like your Black Panther, which again promoted the narrative that your Black man, in order to have power, needs white acceptance, and that this radical Black man who is out of control needs to be stopped before he destroys everything. Because Killmonger was basically a savage, and then what they wanted to do say with him was that if you give this Black man power, he will go out and destroy everything around him. That was a really underhanded racist statement that was made in your Black Panther that literally flew over a lot of Black people's heads, is that they put this statement in the film that, oh, a Black man seeking Black empowerment, he's a savage, but that's not a savage. That's somebody who is normal. Because when I was writing Temptation of John Haynes, it was a Black man. Here's a Black man who has been given power, and what he wants to do is help out other Black people. And I found, some scenes in Black Panther to be really irritating to me. You have Killmonger, who was an agent for the government, like Robert Chavis just said, and then you have Black Panther, who supports the CIA. And I'm looking at this, I'm going, neither one of these guys was for Black people, yet they're presented as Black heroes. And that was one of the things that really annoyed me about this film. I'm sitting there going, neither one of them really was that middle road like I present in Temptation of John Haynes, where I show you that middle road where you have this Black CEO who has Black power and he wants to help out other Black people, and he's willing to put his own feelings aside to help out another brother and help bring jobs and opportunities to other Black people. So I look at that and I say to myself, we're not getting that balanced picture of Black life from Black Panther. But again, the Academy, they want to give this film an award, not to celebrate our accomplishments, but to pat themselves on the back as they give us a symbolic victory that we're supposed to say is some sort of Black milestone, just like we were supposed to say Denzel Washington winning the Oscar for Training Day and Halle Berry winning the Oscar for Monsters Ball was a milestone. And we listened to Halle Berry's speech that day. She was talking about, how this was going to open so many doors for Black women. And we see over the last 18 years, there haven't been that many doors open for Black actresses. In fact, Black actresses today are still the lowest paid in Hollywood. They are still the ones not given any sort of real opportunities at quality roles. And they're not really given any sort of opportunity to present themselves in a place where they can show their acting range. So that award, it was symbolic, and they gave the first Black woman an Oscar, and really she was biracial, but it wasn't about giving Black people those opportunities at all. It wasn't about showing, we're going to open a door for Black people. So that award didn't mean anything. It was just symbolic, and it made Black people feel good, but it didn't help us really move forward. And that's one of those things that I see with this whole Black Panther Oscar nomination and these other awards. It's all about making us fall for the whole symbolism, but it's not about showing us that we're going to really make a real push to give Black people real opportunities and real options that will move the Black community forward. Because all it takes is one green light and you have a Black producer. What's going to happen is, and he's a very positive Black producer, he's going to go out of his way to go out here and hire not only other Black actors, but he's going to go out here and hire other people to work for him, like production assistants, gaffers, best boys, grips. I mean, when you have a Black producer on hand, and he's running the show and he's running the film, it's going to put a lot of workers out here to work. Oh, thank you, Anthony Bates. I know you have to go out to work because he lives in Vegas and it's early in the morning over there. So thank you for taking the time to watch my live stream. I'm going to try to do one a little later. I hope to do another one a little later, but this is the only time I have during the day because I have other things to work on. Right now, I'm working on a new John Haynes script called John Haynes, The Man Who Has Nothing to Lose. And that is the third book in the John Haynes series. I'm hoping to get the second one out soon because right now I'm just trying to work out what I'm going to do with the cover. I'm working on the concept and I don't know where Mike's schedule is because I want Mike Williams to design the cover for John Haynes, The Man Who Has Nothing to Lose, but he's had some health issues. So I don't know if he'll be available, but he's the guy who I want to do not only The Man Who Has Nothing to Lose, but I want him to do Dark Succubus as well. And Dark Succubus is the story that I want to come out this year. That's the story I want to come out this year. I already have the two ISIS. I already have the ISIS and Easteen books. They're ready to go. ISIS All That Glitters. This is ISIS All That Glitters is now available in paperback right now. So if you want to buy it in paperback right now, you can buy that right now. And you can buy the Kindle version on pre-order. But this is the book that I'm going to be adapting for the upcoming ISIS graphic novel in the Indiegogo. But I'm going to leave a link to All That Glitters in the chats. All right, I'm gonna leave a link to that in the chats. Yeah, I have read the X-Men. I actually read the whole Claremont Byrne run, the original Phoenix Saga, so I've read that backwards and forwards. I have some of the early Jim Lee books in my collection. I have some of the Mark Silvestri books as well. But that's I have all those in my collection. So I have I wouldn't Little Great Wall. I wouldn't contract Warner Brothers to do the ISIS series because they would mess it up and they would literally take a lot out of it. And again, if I wanted to do ISIS, I would love to do it with an indie company, and because Warner Brothers destroys things. I mean, I look at what they did to Batman. I look at what they did to Superman and the Justice League. So if I were to ever do an adaptation, it would be with an indie company. So that's where I would go if I ever did an adaptation of any of my properties, is I would do it through a company outside of the big six, because they would try to stay true to the spirit of the characters and to stay true of the spirit of the story. And you're not going to get that with Time Warner, Disney, any of these companies, because they're going to just give you, bland stuff like Black Panther and then tell you that it's a major accomplishment when it's not a major accomplishment at all. Because indie is really the place you want to go, because indies, that means you control the narrative, you control the stories. And with Warner Brothers, they have made a mess. I mean, all you have to do is look at Justice League to see how bad they are adapting things. I look at the way they did Justice League, and they just made a complete mess out of Justice League. And everything there, again, yeah, Supremo is right about that. They do everything by committee, so there isn't a lot of creative control. And when it comes, and what I learned from Sid Field in screenplay many years ago, I mean, I read this book about 15 years ago. He says that the writer is at the bottom of the totem pole, and usually the writer doesn't get much creative control. So once you sell a script, or once you sell the rights to something, people can do whatever they want. And they'll take your story and they will just butcher it and take out key elements. So if you do something through a mainstream studio, or even sometimes even with some of these indie companies, they can do whatever they want, because once you sign those rights away, they can do whatever they please. So it's a major problem when we're related to the entertainment business. But Disney and Marvel, they don't really care. All they want to do is just make money off us and make money at our expense. Yeah, little Great Wall. But today's marketplace, they don't really care about the quality at all. So I'm looking at it, and not a place where I would want to go. Hollywood is not a place I would want to go. I might have to go see this Spider-Verse. Maybe I hope they put it up on one of these, because I don't know if I'll be able to get out to a theater anytime soon, because I have so much to do. I might try to go see the Spider-Verse, or I might try to see it if it ever comes up on streaming. But it's all about them pushing narratives. And with Black Panther, they really just want to push this narrative that, Hollywood wants to make this statement that they're so inclusive, they are so accepting of Black people, and they love Black people so much that they just don't give out any other opportunities to other Black people. So I'm sitting there going, you're nominating this film for this award, but you're not going to give any other Blacks opportunities at making films. You're not going to try to promote other Black fantasy writers' work, and you're not going to try to go out here and help out other Black writers or Black artists, or help them get opportunities on your platform. And that's where I have the issue with this whole Black Panther Oscar okey-doke, because it is an okey-doke being played on the Black community. And many people in the Black community are sitting there saying that this is some sort of accomplishment, and they're making things that are going to be great, and it's going to open all these doors. When we see every time they make these statements, none of these doors open. They're going to make an Asian Batman Beyond. They got to get out of here with that crap, because we know Terry McGinnis is a white guy. I mean, that's an insult. Oh yeah, I know about Netflix. I know about Netflix. I know about Amazon. That's just a trick that they use. Rosbud asked me about theatrical audiobooks. I would love to do that, but the whole thing is I just don't have the money for it yet. I would love to do audiobooks, but I don't really have the money to do it. I always had the idea of hiring actors to play each character and do the narration, but it's just not anything I have the resources for. Maybe if I could get a lot more book sales and I could generate the revenue for it, I would do audiobooks soon. I would do it if I could get the money. I just need to get more book sales. So if you want to see me do an audiobook, I need to get more sales. So Terry's going to be Bruce's. This is ridiculous. This is not Batman Beyond. This is SJW Batman Beyond. This is identity politics. I'm sitting there going, how can Terry be Asian? This is identity politics. So but I would love to do audiobooks, but I just need to get the SJS Direct platform a little bit more stable. So I need to get more sales. I mean, the more sales I get on ISIS and John Haynes and Steam books, the more revenue I get, and then I can invest in something like audiobooks, because I do ebooks. That's how I really started building momentum on the platform, was with ebooks. And it was with the ebooks, people could just, at the time, it was like 2011, and I was giving out ebooks for free, and people started finding my work that way, and they started finding them out through my blogs, and that's how people started to find a lot of my work. And then I started doing YouTube, and then more people started finding about my work, especially when I started talking about African-American fantasy and science fiction, because that's the area that I really wanted to be in, because originally I wanted to do comics, but I couldn't get into the industry. So I started learning trade publishing, and that's how I really learned how to do things as related to storytelling. So that's where I really learned everything. So I would love to branch out in audiobooks, but it just takes time to do that. I mean, I'm starting to learn how to do more promotion with, I did Obsidian's radio show. And the guy from Black Nerds, he contacted me. I was outside the Schomburg. I was waiting for my family member, and he wanted me to make an appearance on his show. And I want to make that appearance as well, because I want to share my fantasy with other readers. But it takes time to expand SJS Direct, and I want to do other things. I definitely want to do the ISIS graphic novel, and I want to expand, that way. I want to do this comic to show that an ISIS series book can translate into a great comic. And I would love to see ISIS, if I can get this Indiegogo funded, start hitting the comic shops and reaching comic readers there, and then have some to take to Comic Cons and comic fairs. That's another place I will want to go, and another area of expansion I want to go in. But right now I'm just doing everything online right now, because the money's not really where it needs to be. Reading what Little Great Wall said, in the long run, they are going to change black characters to other races, because that's the dirty trick. Yes, they'll change our characters, change white people's characters into black characters, but at the end of the day, they want to reverse it around and then say it's diversity. I would do audiobooks through ACX, but again, I just don't have the equipment to do audiobooks just yet. And I need to have going in a quiet space to do audiobooks. I mean, I've done audio excerpts of certain books, and I have those up on YouTube. I have a lot of audio excerpts of my books on YouTube. I have Temptation of John Haynes. I have Legendary Mad Matilda. I have numerous books on there, just the first or second chapters. Voices, I have those on there, but to do a full book, I would need actors, because I can't do Isis's voice. I can't do Easteen's voice, because Easteen sounds like actress Sally Richardson. There's certain characters I based them on actors, so I would need an actor to do those parts in order for them to really come alive. I mean, I can do a decent John Haynes, because I kind of have a John Haynes voice inside of my head that I can imitate that, and you can see that on the Temptation of John Haynes audio excerpt. You could have to search for it, but I can do that, and I could probably do maybe a whole Man Crisis, but that's about it. I could do the narration to do the Man Crisis, so I could read that whole book. I mean, but I would like to do something like that. So that's something I would do, but it's a long-term thing. Because I'm reading through it. Yeah, dude's thoughts, they would be going crazy over that. I mean, if you talk about making an Asian Batman Beyond, that would kill the movie before it even starts, because what that would do is tell everybody that this is a SJW movie, and then we're going to be seeing identity politics rather than Batman Beyond, because Batman Beyond, again, was a major influence on me. I mean, Batman Beyond was one of the things that inspired me to do ISIS, and it was because I got the idea for the ancient Egyptian gods, but they were set in the future from Batman Beyond. And that series had a major influence on me, and I would hate to see it tarnished by Warner Brothers if they went out here and did some forced diversity with making Terry McGinnis Asian, which makes no sense because his name is McGinnis, and that's like an Irish name. So I'm looking at it, it's not really making sense overall. And I look at that and it doesn't really work for me. I mean, it just doesn't work for me from a creative standpoint. If you want to do a Batman Beyond movie, just make it a straight Batman Beyond movie. Make it about Bruce and Terry. Make it about Bruce and Terry's relationship, and make it about him learning how to be a hero, or else you're just going to have a complete mess. Now, I look at Black Panther, and it was like, yeah, it was an entertaining movie, but it wasn't, as I call it, an Oscar-worthy movie. It wasn't on the level of Oscar quality films. When I look at Oscar worthy films, Black Panther isn't in the league of an Oscar worthy film. I mean, it's not on the level of even nominated films like Sunset Boulevard. When I look at a film like Sunset Boulevard, I can see just absolute well-crafted. Billy Wilder did an amazing job on that film. Or a film like The Apartment. I mean, that was a well-crafted film. Those are literally iconic films, and they have iconic visuals. But Black Panther doesn't have any iconic visuals. It just has generic special effects. It has, okay cinematography, has pretty okay acting, but it's an entertaining film, but it's not Oscar level film. So when I look at the whole argument talking about they want to make it an Oscar nominated film, talk about Best Picture, that's ridiculous. Now, I can see the sister who made the costumes. She deserves an Oscar. I mean, her work on those costumes, she deserves an Oscar for that work on those costumes. That's the only person who I would say on the merits deserves an Oscar. Rachel Truth Speaker, she's donated some money to the super chat. Thank you very much, Rachel. I really appreciate it. But that sister, she deserves an Oscar for those costumes, because those costumes were beautiful. All those designs, they were very nice, and they really stood out. I really liked the costume designs on Black Panther. I'll give her credit for that. But the storytelling was just, it wasn't 100% there. I'd say it's about 75-80 on Black Panther, and it's about 75-80 as a film. So it's not Best Picture level. If you really want to see what a Best Picture, there are films that are up there that deserve that are up there that really deserve that type of Oscar and deserve whatever awards they got. Now, Marty, that was an Oscar. That didn't even get an Oscar. They got Palme d'Or from France. And Marty, that is a great film. I mean, Marty, The Apartment, Rocky. Rocky is a great film. I mean, Star Wars. And some of these films didn't even win awards, but they were just cinematically better. They were cinematically overall better. The story was very strong. The characterizations were very tight. They had a story as related to the human condition, and they made a commentary about the human condition. That's something that the older Oscar films used to do, is they made these commentaries about the human condition. They made a commentary about how people related to other people, and they made a commentary about, life in general. That was one of the things that would inspire me when I would watch these films to write, books like The Temptation of John Haynes, where I make a really powerful commentary about Black men and Black women and humanity. And there's a lot of layers in that. Or I did a story like Spinsterella, where I make another commentary about the human condition. I make a commentary about, being an introvert, because a lot of goths are introverts, and how they can find love and and find relationships with each other. Or a book like Spellbound, where I make a commentary on how Black people are spellbound and are looking to fit into this black box in order to achieve white acceptance. When I do those type of stories, I want to make a commentary on the human condition and how the human condition relates to Black people. I remember when I wrote my first script all about Maryland, and I was making a commentary about Black actresses in Hollywood and the struggles of Black actresses in Hollywood. I wanted to make that type of commentary. And when it comes down to Hollywood these days, we don't see that type of story being presented. We see them trying to push this narrative to show that they can virtue signal to everyone they're not a racist. And then they spend 2.5, 3 hours making rants talking about Donald Trump. And people don't want to spend 3 hours watching rich people rant about Donald Trump and talk about how rotten Donald Trump is and how evil Donald Trump is, when really people voted for Donald Trump. And I really don't want to sit there and see this, because you guys are living better than most of the world. And then you're going to sit there and rant about a president that many of these same people also voted for. So Miss Gang Smashers, Spike did get a couple of nominations, I believe, but it's just, we know Black Klansman has no chance of winning any sort of Oscar at all, because Black Klansman was shut out at the Golden Globes, and I don't even think he was considered for the SAG Awards. But I look at it and I say to myself, you know, when it comes down to these films that they're nominating, a lot of them, they're just nominating them because they're desperate to get ratings, they're desperate to get numbers, and they want to get Black eyeballs watching this Oscar show, because most people have decided to tune out of the Oscars because they're tired of Trump rants. They're tired of watching rich people rant about Donald Trump. They're tired of them virtue signaling, talking about Me Too and Time's Up. They're tired of them using this award show as a soapbox to talk about how good they are, when we know that Hollywood is a cesspool. And they just sit there and they're just sitting there talking about how great their lives are. But we look at Hollywood and how Hollywood doesn't really give people an opportunity whatsoever. No, Static Shock was just canceled because it ran out of episodes, Hardcore H, and met the quota, which was 52. And Dwayne McDuffie himself said there were plans to make figures, but just the deal never got through. And that was another thing that I found to be odd, which was Static Shock, again, #1 show, but never got a toy line. I mean, #1 show, never got a toy line. And the only Static that was ever produced was by DC Direct a few years ago. This was the only Static ever produced. And that shows, again, how sad things are. I mean, here's an incredibly popular character, and this is the only action figure we ever got, and sadly, he's undersized. And people have been wanting, they would have probably bought Static like crazy, but they never put this character out here. He said that there was a line where they were going to have Static and Cobalt and a couple of other characters, but it just never, they could never get the deal. So they wanted to make Static figures, but they just never could get the deal through. But Static Shock was canceled because it met its 52 quota. And usually in television syndication and cartoons, once a TV show gets 52 episodes, they end the series. The same thing happened to Danny Phantom. Danny Phantom was getting popular, and just as the show was getting popular, they ended Danny Phantom because it met the quota. Now, Danny Phantom, the guy who made Danny Phantom, he said he wanted to make more episodes. He said he wanted, because the show was just about to go national, it was just about to hit merchandising, but because Nickelodeon killed it, because it met the quota, they killed it. But Static it should have had a toy line, but I don't know. Toy companies, they don't, yeah, again, some of them don't want to see Black characters have an image, because that's something that made people very uncomfortable. It made people, the whole idea of white kids playing with a Black character makes people uncomfortable. Hey, London Taylor, he's another one of my viewers from the UK. I'm glad to have him here in the live stream, but the whole thing of white people playing with a Black character, that makes people uncomfortable. It goes back to that lady with the doll test. And with the doll test, she was saying that, you know, Black children would go out here and prefer the white doll. And with Black Panther, what I'm seeing that's hilarious now is I'm seeing not black, white and Hispanic children playing with Black Panther. And that it's like I was coming back from the laundry one day with my family member, and I saw a kid, he had Black Panther in his hands. And it was like one of those things. I thought about that doll test, and it's like, this is what they don't want. They don't want the idea of you seeing a black image and a black person, as somebody that people idolize and admire. And they don't want the idea of you going out here and playing with that doll, because then you'll start seeing black as having value, black as being beautiful, and black as something to aspire to be like. So that's another thing that they don't want to be seen. That's why you don't really see too much merchandise out here when they do things like Black Panther. When they do make the dolls, or the action figures, a lot of times they don't put the unmaxed heads on the larger figures that are played by smaller children. They'll just put the max heads on there because they don't want you to see the black man's face as something that's attractive. Yeah, Hardcore H. Bruce Hartman had a lot of issues with Danny Phantom, and I was starting to get into Danny Phantom. I want to buy the DVDs from Danny Phantom next, because I really liked that show, but he was having a lot of issues. But he really wanted to continue the show. He wanted to continue the show, but the network didn't want to continue the show. And Danny Phantom was a really solid cartoon. I watched a couple episodes, and it was very well done. It's a very well done show. And I can see why kids were getting into it, but what they just, again, the show wasn't what they wanted on the air. And when these networks don't want certain narratives on the air, because Danny Phantom was one of those shows that actually showed you real diversity, because Danny Phantom had a goth friend and he had a black friend. So they didn't want to show you, a real picture of diversity. So they wanted to get that show off the air. Yeah, they didn't like Static and Gear being together either, because again, if you're showing a black character and he's got a white friend, it makes people uncomfortable. And it shows you that, oh, there's no evil white man, that there's just people. That's something that people don't really want to see on the regular. So that's something that they don't like seeing in stories, is showing that. But what they want to show you is, adversaries, so they can make money against you. So that's what they want to do with this, with their media. With a lot of their media, they just want to show you, these thugged out black men, these gangsta black men, because that fits the stereotypes that they want to push. That's the stereotypes they want to push as related to black people. They want to push the whole idea of this thug and gangbangers, and because all that is a reinforcement of the stereotypes regarding the black brute and the coon. So they like having those stereotypes out there. They don't like having the idea of working class, professional black people. That stuff makes people very uncomfortable, because it shows you that people are just people, and they're judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. And what I really find to be, sad is that they don't really push good cartoons like Static Shock and Danny Phantom anymore, because there's a whole generation of kids who grew up with those cartoons, but nobody wants to make their cartoons into movies. Nobody wants to make that generation's kids cartoons into anything. And those kids want to see their characters. I mean, we get all these old characters, but we don't get any of the new characters. So that's a thing another thing that annoys me, because I know a lot of kids grew up in the year 2000. They want their cartoons, and I like their cartoons. I like watching Justice League, Static Shock, Danny Phantom, all those cartoons. They're a lot of fun to watch, but they just don't really. The only way you can get them is if you're on DVD, or if you go, to one of these other sites out here. And yeah, Static and Gear were equals. Supremo was right; they were equals. So we got to see a black man and a white man on the same level, and they played their both strengths and weaknesses. So that was something we got to see too. We got to see balance from Static Shock. We got to see a black man and a white man on the same level. And Gargoyles, yeah, Hardcore H, Gargoyles was my show. I mean, that was my show back in 94, 95 when I got out of school. That was my first exposure to Sally Richardson, who was the actress who inspired E-Steam. And it was my first exposure to Keith David, who inspired Lucifer. And Gargoyles was one of the most diverse shows, and one of the shows that really inspired me, because it was a show where we saw on a Disney program 2 Black actors in the lead roles. And Sally Richardson and Keith David were the first Black actors to ever headline a Disney project in lead roles. And that was something that I saw as extremely positive. And again, that was one of those things that really inspired me to really get out here and start writing books like Temptation of John Haynes, because E-Steam was inspired by Sally Richardson and Lucifer was inspired by Keith David. So that was Gargoyles was a major influence on me in the early 90s when I was just getting into my early 20s. That was a major influence on my writing. It's a major influence on my storytelling. And if you read Temptation of John Haynes, you'll see that influence from Gargoyles and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, not with the dialogue, because everybody does this Whedon dialogue, but I don't do it. I usually just create my own style, because back then I was creating my own style. But that's where I all got it. That's where I got my major influence from, was Gargoyles. And I'm going to see if I can get it. I'm going to leave a link to Temptation of John Haynes down here. But that's where I got a lot of my influences from for that story, and also got some influences from Ghostbusters as well. Gargoyles, as I see it, was like one of the best things to ever come out of Disney. That was one of the best cartoons they ever did, because it was really showing how they were growing and exploring. Edek asks me, Sean, do you think that there are many great writers that Hollywood is just not looking for? Yeah, I have to agree with that. There are some writers they're just not looking for, because those writers either don't fit their political narrative, or they're telling stories that they don't want to hear. Now, if you are out here telling the stories they want to hear and you follow their political narrative, they'll go out of their way to support you. But if you go out of your way to write stories that don't fit their narrative, they will try to find ways to ignore you. And I saw that happen when I was entering screenplay contests, and I submitted All About Maryland to numerous screenplay contests. And a lot of people, they had issues with the screenplay that I'd written, because I wrote it where I wrote this white female who was the star, Tabitha Strong, as a drug addict. And I showed her brutally beating up Marilyn Marie, the faded Black television star. And they really got angry. I mean, I got, in some of the feedback, people were really uncomfortable. They were really upset about the whole idea of me showing a white starlet as a bad guy and showing a white woman as a villain. They really were uncomfortable with it. And they had an issue with me showing a white woman as a bad guy beating up on a Black girl who was more beautiful than she was and getting more attention than she did. So that was an issue that they had with that script. I'm going to look at Power Records later on after this live stream. I'll take a look at them, but I have been so busy with the writing, making videos, and I finally got to write 2 blogs this week. So I have been a very, very busy man. I've been, a lot of people think, oh, writers are lazy people. They get up at 11 a.m. and they just start writing, and that's not the case at all. As a writer and a publisher, I'm up at 6 a.m. I'm doing writing, I'm checking sales numbers, and I'm getting ready to prepare for today's videos. And then I usually do promotion on Facebook. I usually do promotion on Twitter. And that's usually on a regular day. But these days I've had so much more to do, because in addition to the videos, I'm doing live streams as well. And as I'm doing these live streams, I do them because everybody's been asking me to do them. And I like talking to everybody and sharing what I know about entertainment, like I'm sharing about what I know about writing. And I have been a very busy man, but I want to get a look at those Power Records recordings, and I plan on getting a look at them as soon as I get off this live stream. That might be in about about 10, 15 minutes from now. But I've been a really, really busy man. Thank you, Edek. He says he's gonna be reading my book soon. So I have been a very busy guy. I mean, I've been working harder than I have when I was working at CUNY. I mean, I remember I was working at CUNY in their science library. I would come home from working in the library, and then I would come home and then start revising the 3 scripts I had. I had Cassandra Cookbook, All About Marilyn, and Temptation of John Haynes. And I would come home and then start revising stories. And I haven't worked that hard. I mean, I wasn't even working that hard back then, because I work harder now than I do then. And let me see. How do you have any tips? You have to learn how to manage. Gabriah Bradley asked me, what he knows how busy it is, but do I have any tips? Well, one of the things you have to do is manage your time, and then you have to set goals for what you want to do during a day. And what I do these days is I set goals for what I want to do. Like sometimes I'll set a goal for, I want to write this blog in one day, or I want to write a chapter of a book one day and I'll set aside time to do that. And then I'll set aside time to make my videos, or I'll set aside time to do book promotion. So I'm always setting time so I can have time in between. And I'm also setting time so I can have breaks for myself, so I can go and rest in that time, so that I can let things, my ideas flow, because you really have to take breaks in order to let your imagination flow and get inspired. So I'm always I'm always trying to find a way to get a break here or there. I mean, sometimes I get breaks, like when I was watching Punisher season 2, and I would sit there and I would rest for a minute or here or there. Or sometimes I would just sit there and I'll be like, just sitting there and just thinking, and I would rest. But I always try to find a break here or there. Sometimes I have a break at dinner or something like that. But it's a lot of work when you're working for yourself. And you have to take your time and manage your time, because when you're a freelancer, you are your own boss, and you are the one who sets your schedule. And you'll find eventually your schedule will be almost all day. It will be just like a 9-to-5 job. It's just like it's like a 9-to-5 job, but it just goes on almost all day. I mean, some nights I would work till 1 or 2 in the morning on different chapters of different books. Sometimes I would start at 8 o'clock and I would end at maybe 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And I've done the same thing with editing. I'd be working way into the morning. So a simple 70-page book like this, Isis, All That Glitters, this book, oftentimes it takes me 6 or 7 months just to do the editing alone. Then I have to do the concept sketches to send to Bill Walko. And after I do the concept sketches, I have to look at his concept art. And it's a lot of work just to put together, one of these books. So it's a lot of work. And a lot of people don't know how much work goes just into a 70-page book, or how much more goes into a 400-page book like Temptation of John Haynes. I mean, this book took me literally a year and a half just to edit alone. I mean, it took a lot of time to do the editing just on this one book, 400 pages. I mean, I had to do like 3 or 4 revision copies just to get this one right. So it's a lot of work just putting together one book. What would be my ideal sitcom or drama for television? Edek asks. Well, I wrote a sitcom a while back called All About Nikki, which was a spinoff of All About Marilyn. I have that book up on Amazon right now, and that's my ideal for a sitcom. It was inspired by many of those old 90s sitcoms that kids used to watch in the mornings, and that was my ideal for a sitcom. Oh, here it is. And it involved a spoiled little rich black girl from Beverly Hills. That was my ideal for a sitcom. And people loved that. They loved that book. It was an international bestseller, and it sold well in ebook format. It didn't sell well in paperback, but it sold well in ebook. I wrote 13 episodes of All About Nikki, but that was my ideal for a comedy. and I may do a read of that on a live stream soon. If you guys want me to do a reading of that, I'll do that for you. But it was my ideal for a sitcom, and it was, a lot of people loved it. They thought it was the funniest thing. I had one actress come to me and ask me to do the show. She actually wanted to do the Nikki show after she read the scripts, and I came that close to being produced. But people liked that screenplay. They liked that series of screenplays. They liked all 13 episodes, and it was a mix of Fresh Prince meets Clueless. That was the hook for All About Nikki. It was supposed to be the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air meets Clueless. It was about this spoiled little rich girl named Nikki Desmond. She was sent to go live with her father in Beverly Hills, and everything about gaming. He asked me, why do I think it's sold better in ebook? Well, I gave out the ebook for free. I gave out the first 3 episodes, and after people watched the first 3, read the first 3 episodes, they went out and they bought the first season book. After they read the first 3 episodes, I gave out as a sample on Smashwords. They loved it so much that they went back and bought the whole first season. Now, the whole first season, I wrote that just as a way to be a companion to All About Marilyn, which was the screenplay I had written. And the All About Marilyn screenplay was supposed to be commentary on Black actresses in Hollywood. And I wanted to show how Nikki's life on television was different than Marilyn's life in real life. Because oftentimes when it came down to actresses, we think that they live this glamorous life, but I knew that many Black actresses didn't live a glamorous life. I knew that many of them were living paycheck to paycheck, and many of these shows out here, they really didn't pay that much to many of these performers who worked on these shows like the TNBC shows, or many of the Disney sitcoms, or many of the Nickelodeon sitcoms. Many Black actresses, they were the least paid, and even if they were the lead of the show, there weren't that many, the money that they made wasn't that much. So I knew that, and that's one of the reasons why I wrote Nikki and Marilyn. I wanted to show the contrast between Nikki's life, the television character, and Marilyn's life. But Nikki's book, it just turned out to be incredibly popular internationally and nationally. People loved that book back in 2011 when I released it in ebook format. And they loved it because at the time, you had shows like True Jackson on the air, you had That's So Raven, and those shows were at the height of their popularity. So I put the book out then, and it was like scripts for the show, and a lot of kids were buying them, a lot of people were buying them, and I wrote it just to be just like one of those small, low-budget shows, because I grew up with those type of shows. I grew up with Saved by the Bell. I grew up with California Dreams. I grew up with Hang Time. And, you know, Saturday mornings, this is what people watched. Okay, Doom Dog Film says he's been watching my videos for a couple of years, and he wanted to know what positive traits do you think Black writers should highlight in their work to give their Black characters depth. I think the things you need to focus on are the humanity of the characters, and I think you need to focus on the personality and the voice of the characters. That's going to give the characters depth. And you also need to focus on the internal character traits of a character. So like when I was writing Temptation of John Haynes, the things that I wrote to give his character depth was I wanted to show that he was, you know, a Joe average guy. And I also wanted to show that he had flaws, like he was an introvert, he was a loner, he was a guy who didn't really fit into the world. And this man who was an introvert, a loner, and an outsider, he was being thrust into this position as a CEO. He was going to be this leader, and he had to show how he could be a leader by showing his view from the world outside, because he was an outsider. He was outside of the mainstream, and as a guy who was outside of the mainstream, he could put a fresh and objective take on things. So that gave him some depth. And with Easteam, I wanted to show how this woman, this demoness who was out here, I gave her depth by showing that she was a woman who struggled with her humanity. And the reason why she became a demon was because she hated being human. And now Lucifer was making her be human. And then as the story progresses, she starts to learn how to embrace her humanity, and she starts to love John Haynes. She then learns how to finally accept her humanity. And in the climax of Temptation of John Haynes, we see Eastine coming to embrace her own humanity. And that's where we start to see the major twist in the story. I don't want to give the whole story away, but the story of the Temptation of John Haynes is a very powerful one. And it's one that I urge everybody to go pick up, because once you read that story, it's going to really show you how a Black character can have depth and humanity and be just so multidimensional that it's just like a real person coming to life. So Edek asked me if I could get a director to film one of my books, whom would you choose? I would definitely, I mean, for books like Temptation and Spinsterella, Temptation, I really want Tim Burton for Temptation, but I want Spike Lee for Spinsterella. I would want either one of those, Tim Burton or Spike Lee. I believe Tim Burton would give me the visuals I would want. He would give me the shots, and he would understand the motivations, because with darkly inclined characters, he has a good understanding of them. And I believe Spike has some really good, I love the way he does visuals and stuff. And I like Chio Hodari Coker. I love his work too. I mean, his work, I would love to work with him. I mean, if I wanted to do an adaptation of Temptation of John Haynes, if you could get Chio Coker and Tim Burton together, we could make a masterpiece, I believe. Yeah, I have seen the previews for Justice League versus Fatal 5, and I like seeing the mix of characters they put in there. I saw Mr. Terrific finally being used for once, and I like seeing Jessica Cruz, and it looks like a very solid one. I may have to go stream that, or I may have to download that one once it's released. I definitely want to take a look at that one, because it looks like Bruce Timm, it looks like a really solid one. So I want to give that one a definite try. If that one comes out, I'm definitely going to pick it up, and I'm definitely going to do a review on it. But that's what I want. That's what I'm going to do. But if I could I would love to work with Chio Coker, Tim Burton, or Spike Lee on one of my projects if I got the chance, if we were working on an independent platform. But that's who I would want to work with. Okay, looks like we got another troll, and it's time for me to flag the troll and get rid of them. It's like always around lunchtime, you have the trolls showing up, and they come out here looking to start stuff. So it's like they get off of lunch and then they want to argue and start stuff, and it's really sad. And we're having a great time here. Yeah, but I mean, that's something I would love to. That's something I've been doing. It does look like a continuation of the Timmverse Supremo. It looks just like Bruce Timm picked up where he left off with Justice League Unlimited, and it looks like time has passed with it, but he's still staying consistent. I'm hoping that this it's a great film. But it looks good from the trailer. I mean, it has the same art style, but I'm hoping the story is solid, because the Fatal 5, when they were used in the other cartoon, I forget what the one from the Batman, they used them in Legion. They did a very good job on that one, and it was very solid. So I'm hoping that they do just as good with that. And I saw what they did with the Legion in that Supergirl episode of Justice League Unlimited. So it's looking very promising to me. It's looking very promising as a direct-to-video. I'm hoping at least to a revival of the Timmverse, because the Timmverse was the best adaptation of DC I've ever seen. It was like they rarely had any dud episodes. They just did a great job with them overall. Edek asked me what I believe in an independent platform. An independent platform is a platform outside of Hollywood. So any sort of production company that goes outside of Hollywood, that's something I would want to work with, because when it comes down to Hollywood platforms, what they want to do is they want to take your work and they want to change it, they want to butcher it, and then they want to make it fit whatever narratives they want, but then they don't want to stay true to it. Whereas on an independent platform, you can control the story that's told, you can control the narrative of the story, and you can control the quality of the production. So on an independent platform, you can talk about things like Black empowerment. You can talk about Black first, and you can talk about Black ownership. So that's what you can do on an independent platform. And that's why Luke Cage was so well done, because Luke Cage was done on Netflix's platform. And on Luke Cage, with Chio Hodari Coker, he was able to slip a lot of stuff in. Whereas if he was working for Disney, they wouldn't have allowed him to slip things through. I haven't seen If a Beale Street Could Talk. I haven't seen it, so I haven't seen that one, so I can't really talk about it. I may have to wait for that one to come to television, but I haven't seen that one yet. So I haven't seen Young Justice yet. I'm gonna get ready to see that next month. I'm gonna get ready to see that, and I may do a review of that, because I'm getting ready to get a DC Universe sub. And yeah, that's true, Supremo. A lot of these Hollywood types really aren't in the comics, with the exception of maybe a Joss Whedon or a couple of them. But they like getting money from comic book characters. A lot of the studio executives, especially the older ones, they see the revenue stream coming in, but they're not really into comics, and they're not really caring too much about the mythology or the lore of comics, and they really don't care about the quality of the stories that are told. So when it comes down to them, this is just a cash revenue stream. So that's why they'll go out of their way to deviate from the source material. Well, I'm sorry, Tyler, but I announced the stream yesterday, so. I could do that, but I want to give these creators their royalties. So I'm going to get a sub, Hardcore H. I'm just going to get a sub. It's only 1 month, and I'm just going to watch what I can in that month. And Edek asked me if I think Black Panther will be a classic in the years to come. I don't think so. It looks like just like another run-of-the-mill Marvel film, so I don't think it's going to be a classic. Iron Man would be a classic. Batman 89 is a classic. Superman 78 is a classic. I believe Wonder Woman would even be a classic, but I don't think Black Panther is going to be up there with those. I mean, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man is already a classic, so a classic would really be something that stays true to the source material and is, pretty much solidly considered story-wise, and then also has strong cinematic qualities. And Black Panther it's just not what I would consider a classic film. It's just a film with Black actors in it, but it's not any way, shape, or form what I would consider to be a classic film. So I look at it and it's like, no, I don't really consider it to be a classic. Oh, thank you, Charlie Magnum. Peele being the Hollywood darling, yes, he's just going to come and go. I think Jordan Peele will come and go just like many others, but I don't think he's a Hollywood darling today, but I don't think he's going to last for much longer. Collector's Choices from India High. Captain Marvel, yeah, Captain Marvel will probably get nominated. I don't know about Wu-Tang Clan. Much all I know is like maybe 1 or 2 songs. I mean, I know about some of them making tributes, but it's okay. I have no problem with it. Yeah, Tobey Maguire Spider-Man it's a classic. I mean, the first Spider-Man is a Spider-Man comic book come to life. I mean, it is absolutely perfect. Collector's Choice, I am from the Bronx. So I'm from the Bronx, New York. But I look at, when I consider classics, I consider Batman 89 a classic, Batman Returns, Superman 78, Iron Man, Captain America, the First Avenger, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. Those I could see as classics. And Blade, I see Blade as a classic. Blade has aged beautifully as a film. Blade has some of the best stunts and cinematography, and it's a rock solid film. So I look at those films. Those are what I consider to be modern classics as related to the superhero genre. And those are films that I would highly recommend because they have a strong rewatch value. I'm going to wrap up the stream right now. I want to thank everybody for being here. and I really appreciate you guys taking time with me. I'm going to do another stream next week, right, and I'm pondering making that one about John Haynes and the John Haynes series. So that may be the topic, but it may also be another topic about the Black community. I really want to thank everybody for spending some time with me on the live stream. I may try to do the next live stream a little later, but I can't guarantee it. But I really appreciate you all being here, and I want to thank you. You can pick up my books on Amazon.com. I'm gonna leave another link to that in the description in the chat, and I urge you to pick up my books on Amazon. And I'm hoping everybody I'm hoping everybody has learned about the Black Panther Oscar okey-doke, because I would hate to see everybody get taken advantage of by these Hollywood and be played by Hollywood, because this isn't a victory for us. It's just a symbolic victory. And I believe that we can do better than symbolic victories. I believe if we put boots to the ground, we could go out here and accomplish something major. So that's all for that stream. And I thank everybody for coming out and spending time with me today.